Good morning, everyone tuning in today. News 6 meteorologist David Nazario back in the Digital Weather Center with some updates on all this potential winter weather that could be headed our way. And truthfully, I'll come right out of the gate to say today, confidence has kind of gone all over the place. And if I'm being brutally honest, I'm trying to muster up what bandwidth I can to get you guys as accurate of information as possible without simply throwing my hands up and saying, I'm not too sure what's going on. Because to tell you the bold truth, I like to keep it as transparent as possible. Our models are doing all sorts of janky things, especially within the last 12 hours. I'll show you all the different iterations we have. We'll kind of step outside the link system and go play around a little bit with our third-party sites, and I'll break down exactly why it is we have so many discontinuities and what it does seem like is going on with our computer data and the rapid evolutions that we're seeing in all the different solution or the different outcomes that we're seeing in the model solutions. So, good morning to everybody joining us over on the News 6 YouTube channel. Melissa Riley, I do see you in the chat, as well as those of you joining us over on News 6 Plus. I have a question in the YouTube chat, Melissa Riley. Hey, David, are we going to get any bad weather here in New Smyrna Beach? For right now, it does not look like we're going to get any bad weather, but we're definitely going to get what I call enhanced weather. We're going to warm up a little bit before this next front comes down, and we are likely to see quite a bit of rainfall over the next couple of days. Our rain chances are going up for the weekend, and we'll dial in that forecast as we go through the rest of the day today, and especially tomorrow, once we hopefully get a little bit better information in our hands. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and start switching on over. Here we go, the weather headlines, the next big thing. So first, right out of the gate, I'm going to get you up to speed on some of our latest information here. And you can see, as of now, for this week, what's left of it, today is Friday Eve, clouds are going to linger with some spotty rain coming in from the Gulf. We actually have a very weird little circulation out there. It's not tropical, could be, but it's not anything organized. But you can definitely see a bit of a low-level spin on satellite, heavily sheared, incredibly sheared by the jet stream that's overhead, helping to force down more of that cold air slowly but surely into our neighborhood. Then, as you can see by the weekend, rain chances begin to climb. Some thunderstorms are possible. I'll show you what our in-house higher resolution model shows us as we go through the day on Saturday and into Sunday. And then next week, something is coming. Unfortunately, I don't really have the specifics on that quite yet, and the time frame continues to fluctuate. So it's a very tricky forecast, and I ask that you give us a little bit of grace as we dig into all the different data and watch as this situation evolves, because it does look like we are in for some chop in terms of wintry weather action next week, whether it come in the form of rain, if it comes in the form of a cold rain, or even thunderstorms and high winds. We'll take a look at all that here in just a second, but first, let's get on over to our water vapor satellite shot and see exactly what is evolving out there in the pattern. So I'll go ahead and play the loop for you. Couple different things I want you to see here, and we're starting to get a bit of an idea of what is going on and where that Arctic blast is coming from. And it's the center portion of your screen, right beneath the ticker time frame there under the water vapor banner. You can see an incredible swath, a deep blue swath of moisture and energy from our jet stream. That there is a baroclinic leaf is what it's called. I'll go ahead and draw it in so we can focus in on what it is I'm looking at. This guy right here, that is a low pressure system in the making, and it is going to continue to slide down towards the southeast. And with such a vigorous system dipping in out of Canada across the central United States, that's what's really going to invigorate the pattern and start to bring down all this cold air that's up over the north here. I'll go ahead and zoom the perspective in so you can see all the shades of blue that you see is your Arctic air. That's all the cold air mass associated with the polar vortex, as it's called. And here's that massive storm system that's just going to tug it on down towards the south and prime our atmosphere for some more wintry activity down across the deep south into Texas and the Gulf Coast. We're still watching that area very closely. We're going to be watching here in the Gulf of Mexico as well as Texas before something tries to sweep up and out like so with the orientation of our jet stream at 300 millibars, highest portions of the atmosphere. But this jet is going to play a role in our weather, and you can see that continuous flux of moisture from the Pacific through Baja, Mexico, Texas, across the Gulf, and then across the state of Florida. That's why we are going to have somewhat annoying, pestering, and consistent showers throughout the day today and tomorrow before our rain chances really start to go up. Let's take a look outside right now, looking at the regional radar. We don't have much going on across the south just yet, but Florida is seeing some of that consistent onshore flow. You can see the northern half of our viewing area from about the Orlando metro area, and the further north you go into Deltona, Daytona Beach, Spring Hill, and Bayonet Point getting in on some of the action, kind of headed towards the Tampa area as well. Ocala, Gainesville with some rain and showers out there as well. Palm Coast, Daytona Beach getting a bit of that offshore activity. All this stuff is just going to continue to transition off towards the east and the west. Let me go ahead and switch us over to our actual Barron radar and move us over here so we can see. And I'll change us from the fire and smoke overlay so we can get a better feel for this. So that's the fire. We don't want that. We want the Barron radar for Melbourne. Let's go ahead and get that going. Got to give it a second to boot up. Not too sure why it's taken so long. There it is. So as you can see, we have a little bit of light rainfall moving through the villages to Deltona, and you can see that clear west to east fashion, or that west to east motion, and that is a response of the front that's coming down towards the south. And I'll have to segue us back over here because I can't draw on that other overlay. That is our live Doppler radar. But what's happening here is we have a front slowly spilling towards the south. It is cold frontal, which means it is moving. However, I know that Weather Prediction Center has it highlighted as a stationary boundary. This is going to continue to keep us humid despite the cold temperatures in place. We're still sitting at about 50, 60 degrees across the board right now. And you can see here when we switch over to our national wind chills, it feels like 56 out there in Orlando. And those colder temperatures up north have receded some. They have relatively warmed up just a tad, but then we're also going to be watching here very closely as that Arctic air comes down. We're going to watch this part of the United States very close because we're going to see Bismarck, Sioux Falls, Omaha, Minneapolis, getting over into Milwaukee and Chicago. All these general areas are going to start to drop, and they'll drop fast as that Arctic air begins to finally impede on the setup out there. So, real quick, I want to go ahead and show you one of our latest models. This is the GFS model fans. This is for 6 o'clock, or I should say 6 Zulu. I'm so sorry. I'm telling you, my bandwidth is just about tapped in terms of trying to digest all this activity. I have models pulled up to my left. I have models pulled up here, and I have models here that I'm going to take you through in a second. And I have a bunch of notes in front of me as well for all the information I've been trying to crack down on. And because it's been becoming more and more chaotic, and that's when our job becomes a lot more difficult for you all, because instead of gaining the confidence as we get closer in time, we start to lose it, and that's when things get tricky, especially from this range. You can't really forecast based on current conditions because there's things out there that aren't even there yet. They don't exist. So this is just about locked in. There's been a great amount of consistency with this first push of Arctic air, and that's what you can see coming across the screen right there for Saturday afternoon into Sunday night. That is when we're expecting our next Arctic front to come on through. You can see very early morning Sunday into the sunrise point of this weekend coming in on Sunday. That's where you can see that clear change in the wind flow. We could be gusting anywhere between 25 to 35 miles an hour over central Florida because of how dense of a plunge that cold air is. And this is something the models have been also playing around with as well. How far south is it going to go? And that's really going to dictate what happens after that. And that's where it becomes a lot more of I will honestly openly say a guessing game, because we just have to wait and see. The models are really struggling with this Arctic air. Some want to progress it faster. Others want to take it slower. Others want to move it like molasses in wintertime. Others think it's going to move through like a rushing flow of water. If you fast forward from there, the Arctic air goes stagnant. It kind of marinates over the Gulf of Mexico. And then, per the 6 Zulu GFS, that's where our storm system really gets cranking. And this is probably the most bullish representation that we've seen. And I'm going to keep the caution sign there from yesterday because this is not going to stick. I mean, look at that. We have mid grade, if not high end, tropical storm conditions forecast for Pensacola, 58-mile-an-hour gusts. That's incredible. Is it doable? Absolutely. If we have such a strong and potent system that starts to develop in the western Gulf of Mexico, feeding off of that Arctic air and the jet stream above it, we could absolutely see conditions like this realized, especially where the greatest change in temperature and air pressure is. Is this what's on the model right now? No, I'll show you that in a second. This has completely changed, and that's what makes our lives difficult, trying to dial this in as we go through time. Here you go. This is as we go through Friday, next Friday morning, looking at tropical storm conditions for Central Florida. This has been very, very back and forth. Extremely back and forth. So this is going to be a very tedious forecast to work on for you all. And that's exactly what I'm going to do when we take this 2-minute break here in about 30 seconds. I'm going to go back to the models on my left-hand side and hopefully get a bit of a general consensus of what the latest information shows us, because there have been some dramatic changes. And I'm going to do my very best during our second block of time together during this live stream to break it all down and give you my best conclusion as to why this is such a rocky road, no pun intended. So don't go anywhere. If you're in YouTube, please stay put. I do see Carbon Fiber, Lamala do have some questions and good mornings that they dropped in the chat. We will be right back. We're just going to take a quick 2-minute intermission, and I am going to go ahead and double check some of this model data. We'll be right back. And we're back. Thanks for sitting tight. So I just took another quick glance at our models, and I can openly say, at least until we get this afternoon's rendition of the European model, they're all more or less showing something different, which is unheard of as we get closer to an event point in time. It's very bizarre, but I will go ahead and start to walk you through some of the latest data just for the sake of transparency, so you can get a better feel for what it is that I'm seeing that is just a bit mind-boggling. So what I'll do is I'll take us over to our handy-dandy tropical tidbits, and I'll show you, we're starting off with the German model, the Icon model. This is as of 12 Zulu, so the data started to populate into the computer model at around 8 o'clock this morning, and then usually it takes a couple hours for the system to do what's called assimilate and interpolate it, which is basically do all the mathematical equations, look it over multiple times, and then spit out what we see here in these graphical charts. So this is the icon here, and you can see there's that Arctic blast coming down across the United States. Again, excellent consistency with this first wave, and that's mainly because we're within the 3-day window now. We're finally only about 48 to 62 hours away from it arriving here in Central Florida. And then as we get into next week, there's Monday into Tuesday still showing some kind of area of low pressure with increased rainfalls here for Central and South Florida occurring through the Gulf of Mexico. This has been very consistent with the German model. It sweeps across the deep south. You can see lots of snow for our neighbors up to the north, that snow line being a bit hit or miss. Some nudges north, some nudges back down towards the south. But regardless, this model has not changed its repetition. It's still showing exactly the same thing. I'll go ahead and switch us over to our Canadian model. Once again, the Canadian model, we are dialed in. As we go through time into Saturday and then Sunday, you can see within about 60 or so hours that Arctic air is going to be knocking on our door. This is the 66-hour mark, exactly, almost an exact replica of what we had over on the German model. So the Canadian model and the Icon are doing about the same song and dance. There goes that Gulf of Mexico system. Lots of potential wintry weather impacts for the Deep South, Dixie Alley, and our neighbors to our northwest in Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. Note that the rain-snow line is a little further to the south. These are those little nudges that I was telling you about. And low-key, for all you watching right now, I wish that that were all it is that we were watching in terms of the adjustments. Because watch when we move over to the GFS and then the European model, albeit the Euro is a little old. So there you go. This is, again, Wednesday, a mirror image of what the Icon was showing. Now I'll rewind the clock again, and we'll go back to the GFS. This is the 12Z GFS. Locked in. There you go. 66 hours out, 60 to 66 hours. By Saturday evening into early Sunday morning, we have that Arctic front and that big batch of cold air knocking on our doorstep. We're very much in line and locked in with this first scenario, and that's what's going to prime the environment for the next one. Now, if I fast forward to Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, notice that the GFS has everything cranking to our east, in which case this would be an enormous forecast bust based on the continuity that we've developed up to this point. If I rewind us to the previous model run, everything's forming to our west, and we get a massive winter storm. This mimics more of what the German and the Canadian model were talking about, but if I go back to the 12Z, hold that, freeze frame that in your mind, and I'll click 12Z right now. Now, if you notice, we have a winter storm that is up in the Great Lakes with the tail end of the front back down over the Dixie Alley Gulf Coast area, which, again, regardless, if you're here in Central Florida watching with us, it all just means rain in one way, shape, or form for us and maybe some windy conditions, but I've also been working feverishly behind the scenes. And if you have the ability over on YouTube or on News 6 Plus to go check out our social media pages and my own, WX Center_Nazario, you'll find all the latest information, and I will be streaming consistently over the next few days covering this winter weather event for not only us here in Central Florida, but if you have friends, relatives, neighbors, north, south, east, or west of us across the United States and other neighboring areas. So the GFS has completely changed its song and dance and now has an area of low pressure that forms in Oklahoma and moves off towards the east-northeast, bringing with it maybe a smaller drop in temperatures, not nearly as hellacious of impacts as we were realizing on earlier model runs. And then I'll show you, just for the sake of it, because it's old, so we won't know until the 12Z iteration for the Euro comes in. But I'll show you 0Z, our overnight run. This was the 0Z Euro, still showing a bit of a snow event and lots of heavy rainfall for Central Florida as that low begins to eject up into the Atlantic, followed by that next potential winter system that is mimicked on the GFS. And I'll go to the most recent run, 06Z, which came out around 2 o'clock in the morning. And now the European model is thinking the nothing situation for Florida, minus some rain if you live south of the I-4 corridor. So lots of volatility, and I don't know. My gut says we still need to watch, and we all need to pay close attention, especially if you live further north in our state, because we do still have a lot of consistency in other models. The GFS and the Euro are the kings at being very dramatic in terms of the rapid shifts and adjustments that they will make run to run. But the fact that we still have other models highlighting a scenario to where we do have an area of low pressure driving our rain, wind, and thunderstorm chances up for us here in Central Florida, combine that with winter storm activities to our north, all of us in the southeast and up the east coast should be paying close attention, and we need to be monitoring for the potential that that stronger solution returns, and that's something we be facing next week as we go through Wednesday and Thursday. Because I'll go back, and I'm not trying to sound any kind of way, shape, or form like I'm trying to hype this up, but this solution here, if it were to verify, this would be a very, very this would honestly be a very, I'll say, an adventurous day for us in Central Florida. This would definitely be an adventurous style event for us in Central Florida, given the dynamics that we have in play. The surface winds would be cranking out of the south before that front comes through. And then in the mid-levels, we have plenty of spinning, plenty of that wind shear to drive any possible severe weather, especially given that warm component coming out of the south from the Caribbean and the Florida Straits, the southeastern Gulf of Mexico. But that has changed completely, and you can see here as of 12 Zulu, that threat has transitioned much further towards the north into the mid-Atlantic, so we are technically out of the woods for now. Again, I'm going to be watching very closely what the latest European model does. If it continues to hold steady and start to trend towards not much is going to happen here in Florida, then I'll let you all know. Lamala over on YouTube says, excited for more cold weather. Last summer was horrible, and I do agree. It was rough last summer. I'm hoping it won't be too cold on Tuesday. I go horseback riding. I am doing equine therapy. That's for people with special needs. I'm learning how to ride, Melissa Riley. Well, I do hope, and I'll be doing my best here in the Digital Weather Center and back home behind the scenes to send positive vibes and make sure that the weather is as crystal clear and comfortable as possible. So that's another thing, Melissa, to tell you the truth, now to answer your question before we get ready to wrap up, that's another thing our models are now struggling with. So initially we were seeing temperatures falling into maybe the low 40s in the morning, getting back into the 50s and 60s in the afternoon with not much of a wind chill, which in my opinion is not too bad, especially if you're going to be getting outside. Now, if you watch our latest model data, however, now we're starting to trend back into cold territory where you can see even for the hottest part of the day on Tuesday, the GFS is thinking we won't get out of the mid-40s with some winds peppered in there as well. If I switch over to our surface winds, you can see we still have 15, if not maybe 20 miles an hour coming out of the north, which will definitely keep us cold. The European model at 6 Zulu also shows the same song and dance, a deeper plunge of that cold air with the warmest temps on Tuesday, maybe making it to 40 degrees, and that's it. So, to tell you the truth, we have a very tricky forecast ahead of us. We got to get this first winter system through and see how much of that cold air establishes itself far to the south, whether it be here in Central Florida or just to our north. I personally think if that cold air only makes it so far and gets stuck, if it gets hung up over the Gulf Coast, then we'll probably be looking more at those solutions that involve a stronger storm system as we get a bit of that colder air to mix in with the warm Gulf of Mexico waters and the dip in the jet coming down through the upper Gulf Coast line. If that cold air coming in this weekend and Monday does make it further to the south and doesn't get hung up over the terrain, then we'll probably see a lot of the wintry impacts stay well to our south, and all the rainfall will still come through, but our temperatures will also drop a little bit more. So it's kind of a big give and take. It's a huge give and take, and there's a lot of moving pieces and variables, which is why, if I can be brutally honest with you folks, I prefer tracking the tropics. Winter weather is not fun. I'll even take severe weather over this as opposed to these giant winter storms that the models can get very finicky with. I always say tropical cyclones are very sensitive features. Winter storms are just as sensitive, and we are now seeing that in relation to these cold temps, all the different volatile pieces of the environment driving that cold air down out of an unnatural source region into another, and then the jets misbehaving because of it, because the temperatures are what drive the jet stream. And that's another reason why I say where the cold air goes is really going to dictate what happens next. So thank you all very much for watching. Let me see. I do have a quite lively chat today. Thank you so much. Pom Mom, yikes, it's time to double check on my homeowner's insurance. Now, it's not going to get that crazy. If you're in Central Florida, don't sweat it that much. We're not forecasting any tropical cyclones or let alone hurricanes like we dealt with last summer and fall. So definitely don't have to worry about that. But in terms of just watching whether or not we have just garden variety rain and showers or possible thunderstorms and high winds for our area, that's going to be the key. I wrote an article on clickorlando.com that you guys can go ahead and digest as well, which kind of breaks down the lunacy of our computer models. There's such a large margin of error here. We'll either get very cold with little to no weather impacts, or we'll have this going on. So we're in a very wide margin of error right now, and we're going to be working feverishly between today, tomorrow, and into the weekend to see exactly what's going to be happening, carefully scrutinizing what goes on real time, and then how the models adjust as more of this stuff can finally make it into the United States and be picked up by computer analysis and observations taken by us at ground level, and then the weather balloons and so forth. So again, check us out on ClickO or clickorlando.com. Follow us on News 6 WKMG on all your social media platforms. And feel free to shoot me a follow as well. If you have any questions or comments you want to ask me one-on-one, feel free to reach out to me, WXCenter_Nazario. We're going to go ahead and wrap up. I do hope you guys have a great rest of your Friday Eve. It is Friday Eve. We're almost to the weekend. I'll be also working through the weekend, so busy next couple of days working on this, cranking information out for you all, and then I'll be hitting the broadcast side of things Saturday and Sunday morning if you'd like to tune into there, where I'll also continue to digest and break down what's going to be happening next week. So thank you all very much for watching. Have a beautiful rest of your day. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you again soon. But until then, this is the Digital Weather Center signing out.